Hey, John here from John's Do It Yourself. A coworker was getting ready to retire and she asked me if I would build her shadow box. Now I've built a shadow box like this before, but I thought this time I'm going to change it up a little. Actually, she wanted the flag in the corner, but she did like the coin racks, just not top and bottom. So we're going to keep them just to the bottom and we're going to put the flag in the corner, and I'm going to change it up here a bit and make this with plugs. It'll be a little bit easier of a job. And so the last box probably was about a 6 or a 7 in difficulty, and I'm going to try to get this one down to about a 4 or a 5. So if you're going to follow along, I think this box is going to be a lot easier for you to build. So let's get cutting.
Okay, like I said earlier, the only stipulation for this box was that it was to be 2 feet by 1.5 feet because it was going to go on a shelf. Now normally I would just start cutting knowing these numbers, but before I waste any wood, I need to know that 1.5 feet for height will be enough for both the flag and the coin rack. So I quickly draw out the parameters of the box. I take out the flag. The flag is only 2.5 feet by 4 feet. So laying out the flag, I can get a good feel for how many stars I want displayed. 4 stars is about 9 inches. And if I go 9 inches in each direction and measure across to make sure all the stars will be displayed at the bottom, I will need 14 inches to complete the triangle. Going back to my draft, since I drew the height out to 1.5 inches, 1 inch will be 1 foot and the 1/2 inch will be 6 inches. I can make my mark to see that about 9 inches will give me about 3 inches shy of the beginning of my coin rack, and this should work just fine. Like I say in all my builds, the flag is what makes this a custom shadow box. You should always start with your flag. I want the box thin, so I need the width of the flag once folded to begin. So my next step is to cut the piece that goes behind the first layer of the flag so I can shape it. Now you can use anything here, cardboard, thin birch, plastic, wood, but I always have scrap plexiglass lying around, so I use this. I take my miter gauge and use a speed square to ensure that I have it set at a perfect 45 degrees. I never trust the numbers. And then I just cut my plexiglass on the table saw. 9 inches out and a perfect 45 should give you the 14 inches that you need to fit the corner. With your piece cut, you can lay it down over your stars and into position. One of the benefits to using plexiglass is that you can see through it. This will allow you to get perfect star alignment and make it easier to tape into position and fold up. Once you are done folding it, you can see how thick your box needs to be to fit the flag. And since this flag was partially synthetic, it folded really thin. So I can pretty much make this box as thin as I want. And given it some thought, it will probably end up as thick as the coin rack that I make below. My first rips will be at 3.5 inches. They are the top and the bottom of the box, not the very bottom where the coin rack will be, but the bottom of the top square. Once I have those ripped, I will take them to the miter saw and cut them 2 feet long, keeping within my parameters of the box. Now to conserve wood, I will cut the remainder of the board first, at 1.5 feet. This will give me the height of the box once I decide how wide I want the feet at the bottom to be for the coin rack. I take this piece and find the center, and then I will rip it perfectly in half. Set your fence back to 3.5 inches, and then take those pieces you just cut and rip them again. But this time, stop 5 inches short of the bottom. Do not cut them all the way in half. This will allow us to design and cut the bottom foot of the box. The top 3.5 inches will match the previous pieces of the box we already cut. At this point, you are not limited on what shape you can make the foot of the box look like. I have done this quite a few different ways, but a simple round foot always looks perfect. The key here is to just make sure both sides are a perfect match. So take your measurements and then draw out your lines. I use a Sharpie after I have it just right, so I am not confused on which lines I should be cutting. But remember, you don't have to copy me. You can make this look any way you want. Once you have the foot you want, you can cut it out. You don't have to have a bandsaw to cut this. This small arch can easily be cut with a jigsaw. The next step is to sand your pieces. It is so much easier to sand the pieces before you join them together. So take this opportunity to sand them now. And as always, I will sand in 3 steps. This box I will start with 180, then 220, and I will finish up with 320. Now that we are done sanding, we can cut our 45-degree angles to join our top and sides of the box. Pay attention to the foot of each side to ensure you are cutting the correct angle. A wrong facing foot could be costly here, so discount double check that your angles match the inside of the outward foot before you begin. Now, the crossbar in the center of the box needs to be shortened to fit. It is the exact same length right now as your top crossbar. So you can take the top piece and measure it from inside angle to inside angle. This should give you the exact length of your center piece. With that measurement, you can cut the center crossbar to fit. With all that out of the way, we can begin building out our coin rack. I have a piece of oak that is a bit thinner than the rest of the pieces I am using to build this box, so I'm going to use that as the very bottom. Use the piece that you just cut as a guide for how long these pieces need to be. And grab two other pieces and cut them to length as well. We will worry about how wide they are later. I will take out my dados and set my blades to 1/4 of an inch. There will be no set angle here, just a straight 1/4 inch cut. Each board will get one cut. Therefore, we will have 3 levels for coins, and each higher level will also assist in supporting the coins below with a backdrop. Before I join these pieces together, I give them a good sanding. This time I take it all the way to 400 grit. This will allow them to have a very smooth feel. Since people might be taking coins off the rack and looking at the back of the coin, this area will be touched quite a bit more. So I want it a bit smoother, and it's easier to sand these while they're still apart. I put a bead of glue down and clamp it tight. Use one of the side pieces to ensure that the end is flush, and then place a staple in it to hold it. Ensure the staple is close to the back so the next piece will cover it. The only piece you can staple is this middle one. The top level of the coin rack is exposed, and we don't want any staple to show, so we won't use them on the top. We will just clamp them down tight. So now that I realized I needed to cut my backplate relief, I moved over to the table saw. I set my dado blade to cut my rabbet. I used the width of the backplate to set my blade. I set a tooth of the blade just a fraction of a bit higher, so I know the backplate will set well within the rabbet. Again, very important, make sure that you are cutting the rabbet on the side of the outward facing feet. If done right, one piece should look like you are going in the backwards direction. Lay them out on the table in the right direction so you don't have to give this any thought while the saw is on. While you still have your dado on, go grab your coin rack. The very back of this piece will need to have a rabbet for the back plate as well. That will finish out a perfect square on the back of the box. Before we join the top and the last piece of the coin rack, we need to make sure that we trim it to match the depth of the back plate rabbet. Set your side piece in position and mark your top piece based on that rabbet. If you look closely, I have placed a mark 1 inch from the face of each board. This will help ensure that each board is evenly aligned. Cut your last piece based on the mark you just made to match the rabbet, and then secure it to the top of your coin rack. Glue it down. Remember, no staples in the top. The reason I built the coin rack in this manner was because when told that the shadow box was going on a shelf, I knew that the base of the rack needed to have some substantial weight to it to keep it upright, and I thought that stacked wood could get pretty heavy and it would get the job done. With all my rabbets cut, I needed to trim the center piece of the box so it would fit between the face and the back plate rabbet. It's just a quick measurement and then cut the piece to fit. In order to get a visually pleasing coin rack, I grabbed a fairly large coin and I placed it on the top row of the coin rack. From there, I measured up 1 inch and placed a mark. This will be the lowest my crossbar should go. This will allow enough clearance when placing or removing coins from the top row. The next step is to cut your glass groove. When it comes to the sides, you don't want the groove extended down beyond the bottom of the crossbar. If you do, you'll have an awkward line where you can see it in the coin rack space. So set a top line on your table saw and stop early before you cut into the coin rack space. For the side where the foot will face the fence, just use an extra piece of wood to give yourself clearance away from the fence. Take each side piece and lay the crossbar across where you intend to mount each one. The bottom of the crossbar should be at least 1 inch above the mark you made of your largest coin. Remember when you took that side mark while it was still in the rack? Well, simply lay the crossbar on the side and trace the width of your piece onto the side pieces. Make sure you're not below that 1 inch mark. That will give you the clearance above your largest coin. Now the first time we made this box, we cut a slot and then placed the crossbar in the slot. That's a little more difficult than you think to do without leaving any kind of gaps. So this time we will simply drill holes, screw the box together, and then hide everything with plugs. So your first step here is just drilling a standard hole that will still keep the screw tight in the center of the area where you plan to place your crossbar. Change out your drill bit to a size that is larger than the screw head and place a 1/4 inch countersink exactly in the center of the screw hole you just made. Now this is my first time making plugs, and in the long run I can tell you that it is easier to make the countersink first and then drill all the way through with the smaller bit. The shape of the drill bit leaves a cone shape at the bottom that allows the smaller drill bit to always find the center and keeps it easy, so when you're screwing in your screw, it's always going to be in the center of your plug. We are also going to repeat this process at the foot of the sides to ensure that there is a screw holding tightly onto the coin rack. This process though will be exactly the same. Now that you have where your plugs are going to be, it's time to actually make the plugs. Simply take a plug cutter and a piece of the same type of wood. Unless you are looking for some contrast where you can find a dark mahogany piece that will show the plugs, it looks pretty cool sometimes. I will try that on another box. For this one, we will use the same color and hide the plugs in the grain of the wood. You simply put on your plug cutter and you cut at least halfway through the wood. Very simple process. Remember those lines we drew for the crossbar above the coin rack? Well, now we need to have a glass groove extend at a minimum halfway through the center of those lines. Here, I attach a CNC bit and just use the drill press at a high speed to ensure that we can take the glass groove all the way into the center of that crossbar and there'll be no issues once we put our glass in. Now that you've made the glass groove extend far enough down into our side pieces, we can now glue the side pieces into place. Start by putting some glue on each side of the coin rack, and then, while on a flat surface, place the side pieces in place and squeeze them tight. Find something that can keep your glass groove aligned and place your crossbar into position. In your plug hole, drill through and into the crossbar. This will make your pilot hole. This will keep everything aligned later when you put in your crossbar permanently. Now that your pilot holes are drilled, you can sand off any interior and exterior pencil marks that you made during alignment. Place the top piece of the shadow box into position. You're not mounting it, you're just holding it firm. And measure from rabbet to rabbet. Then take a piece of tempered hardboard and cut your back plate to fit. When screwing into hardboard, always drill a pilot hole. This will keep your wood from splitting or the screw head from stripping when you're trying to place it in. Then you can screw in your screws. I am using 1-inch drywall screws here. You can find these at any Home Depot or even Lowe's, or also in the description of this video. With the base screwed in tight, we are going to install the crossbar. Place your screw in a position with the tip of the screw point almost through the side of the box. Then place some glue on your crossbar and hold the piece in position until the tip of the screw finds the pilot hole and moves your crossbar into place. It does not hurt to place something into the glass groove to ensure it stays aligned when you're screwing it in. But if you did this earlier when making the pilot hole, you should be good to go. Here I discount double check just because I'm OCD. We are now going to cut the flag housing crossbar. Place the back plate in position so you have something for your box to sit on. Since we have the flag folded and ready to go, we are going to throw away the original measurements that we made when drafting this box. So just place the flag in the corner of the box and make a mark, then measure that mark. And what we're going to do later is repeat it on the other side. Then take that measurement and add a 1/2 inch to it. The length plus the 1/2 inch will be what you mark and cut for the crossbar. So when I cut all my original boards, they were all the same width. So the crossbar for the flag does not account for the rabbet and the glass groove right now. So a simple measure using the actual top of the box piece between the glass groove and the rabbet, and I will set my saw to trim for my flag housing. This should make it fit between the glass groove and the rabbet perfectly. Now, every box, I like to try something new. And since I'm going through the hassle of using plugs on this box, I was not about to just staple the crossbar into position. So for this one, I will try something new. I will use pocket holes and screw the flag crossbar into position. It might be a little more work, but the screws will be hidden on the back of the box, so they won't be seen at all. And it will make for a more secure and stable box once I screw it into the top crossbar. Now, flip your box over to the back side. You only get one shot at this, so here's what you need to do. First, use a scrap piece of plexiglass or glass and place it in the glass groove so your piece does not obstruct the glass groove in any way, shape, or form. Then, place some glue on both ends of your piece. Then place a clamp in position to keep your crossbar from moving or sliding when you start to screw it in. Start off slow at first. When your screw takes bite into the wood, it can have a tendency to pull the piece down and out of position. So don't think you can just hold it. Use 2 clamps to keep it from sliding. Then screw in your piece. Let's start on your display board. Clamp the top piece into position and slide your foam board underneath the box. With a pencil, trace out the perimeter of the inside of your box. Then cut it to fit. You can save yourself the hassle of gluing 2 pieces together like I have to do if you just buy the 1/2 inch foam board. I buy all my foam board at everything's $1. So I have to glue 2 pieces together because they don't sell the 1/2 inch. Take a screwdriver and snap off one of your plugs. Then fill the empty hole with glue. Dip your plug back into that glue and then seat it securely into the hole. Then repeat this for the other side. To do this the right way, you should actually wait until the glue dries, then sand down your plugs before you stain. I am very impatient, and so I actually start staining before I have shaven off the tops of the plugs. I recommend you do not do this and learn from my mistakes. It's not really a mistake, but it just gives you an extra step. Okay, so I am using the standard golden oak stain here. This always makes my oak projects look their best, so I will not be changing this up. So let's stain the box. Take the top of your box and measure your glass screw from end to end, and then use this piece itself as a straight edge to cut your glass. We all know I make this up as I go along, so here I decided that it would be easier to unscrew the flag crossbar from the side of the box and use the clamp and block technique to join the flag crossbar to the upper portion of the box. Before I put it together. That way this will allow me greater flexibility when I try to screw it in to keep it from moving. To save yourself sanding the plugs down, you can use a flat saw and cut off the top of the plug, or you can just sand the whole thing down. And I actually think sanding the whole thing down is faster. But if you're going to use a flush cut saw, place a piece of tape on it before you begin so you don't damage the rest of the wood. The thin piece of tape will act as a buffer between the teeth of the saw and the wood below. So in the end, I just resanded both entire sides of the box, and then I had to restain it. So this is what I said, if you are impatient, you wouldn't have to do this step because you would have already only stained once. I'm going to shorten the video up some, so we will bypass the felting of this box. It is the same in all my videos, so if you need to see this, check out any of the other hundreds of videos I have on shadow boxes. So next, slide in your glass and then place a little bit of wood glue on the top of each side. Place your top piece in position and then staple your piece into place. Now remember this, be careful not to strike the glass with your staple. If you do this, we will be starting over again. So make sure you strike it more towards the back side. The last step is to place your flag in the box, add all of your shadows, and seal up the box. So for most of the shadows inside this box, I spent some time building them. So if you are interested in seeing how that was done, click on the link at the end of this video to see me build out the small displays and plaques.
According to some accounts of naval history and tradition, when a sailor retires and is departing the ship for the last time, it is considered bad luck for the sailor's shadow to touch land before she does. Thus, the sailor's shipmates would construct a sturdy box, handcrafted of the finest materials, in which to display mementos of the sailor's accomplishments, thereby symbolically creating a shadow of the sailor. The box safely contains the sailor's shadow until safely ashore, at which time the shadow box can be given to the sailor in a presentation ceremony. Historically, when a sailor would join a ship's crew, she would join that ship for her entire career. During the sailor's voyages to ports of call around the world, they would collect many trinkets, souvenirs, and reminders of their travels. Naturally, as space aboard a ship was at a premium, these items tended to be small. Ideally, a shadow box serves not only as a reminder of the achievements and accomplishments, but also as a summation and a culmination of a career. A shadow box should enable a stranger glancing at its contents to gain a substantial understanding of the owner's past service and achievements. The national flag is placed inside the shadow box to symbolize the country that has benefited from the faithful service of the recipient of the shadow box. Lieutenant Briggs and Chief Warrant Officer Joyner will now present Lieutenant Commander Ward with her shadow box.